Hey Pokemon fans, today I'm going to be going over the Pokemon Anime Iceberg. Now, I'm a huge Pokemon fan, I really like Iceberg videos, so I thought it would be fun to make an Iceberg video myself. Now, I decided to talk about the Pokemon anime because I never saw an Iceberg video for the anime. I saw one for Pokemon in general, I saw some for several different generations, even some for some spin-offs, but not the show. Which is a shame because, as we'll soon see, there's lots of interesting stuff to talk about. Now, I'm sure you know how an iceberg goes. You start at the top with more well-known facts, and slowly go deep beneath the surface to more obscure and weird entries. So, without further ado, let's begin. Kiss with Serena. This entry is a reference to the ending of X and Y. In Serena's final scene before she leaves, she kisses Ash before saying goodbye forever. Or at least, it's heavily implied that she does. The scene actually pans away from their faces, so we don't actually see what happens. Well, that's what happens in the English version. I'm not sure if it's different in Japan, I didn't watch it in Japanese. But at least here, that's how it plays out. Electric Soldier Porygon. Electric Soldier Porygon is arguably the most famous and influential banned episode in all of anime. In it, a virus is attacking the Pokemon Center's transport system, causing a malfunction that makes Pokemon disappear from their Pokeballs when transferred over to the center. So Ash and company, with the help of a Porygon made by the scientist who created the transport system, named Dr. Akihibara, go into the cyberspace of the system to help fix the issue. Spoiler, it's Team Rocket. This episode was banned for its intense use of flashing lights. There are several scenes where bright, strobing, red and blue lights flash on screen at rapid rates, causing eye pain and headaches. This comes to the forefront and is seen towards the end of the episode, where Pikachu stops an incoming missile from attacking the crew by using Thunderbolt. Incredibly rapid flashing red and blue lights fill the entire screen. This was too much, and it caused over 100 Japanese children to have to go to the hospital for epileptic seizures. After this, Pokemon was pulled off the air for several months. Excluding the coronavirus pandemic, this is the only time this has happened in Pokemon's 20-plus year history. Changes were made in the production of the Pokemon anime to prevent a situation like this from ever happening again, and the episode never went to the West in any way. In Pokemon's long and storied history, this episode is perhaps the one that had the biggest influence. It changed how animation in Japan is made, with less strobing lights and rapid light changes used in the creation of the animation. It changed how animation was regulated in Japan, where now they check and censor flashing lights in their shows. If you ever wondered why, during intense fight scenes in animes, the lights get dim, you can thank this episode. And lastly, it changed Japanese animation culture. Anime became known and stereotyped as those shows with bright lights that give people seizures. This was the thing that The Simpsons parodied in their trip to Japan. So, overall, a very important episode. Aim for the Horn. This entry references an infamous scene from episode 55 of the original series, Riddle Me This. In it, Ash is fighting Blaine's Rhydon with Pikachu to earn his Volcano Badge. None of Pikachu's moves are having an effect, so Ash tells Pikachu to aim for, quote, the horn! Pikachu does, and they win the fight. After it happens, Brock explains that,
smart move! Rhydon's horn acts just like a lightning rod!
I'm sure Rhydon got a charge out of that!
To detractors of the show, this moment is the prime example of what is called Pokemon Anime logic. That is, stuff that happens in the anime that goes completely against what works in the games, and even what makes sense logically. In the games, it doesn't matter where Pikachu hits the electric attack. Rhydon's a ground type, and is immune to electric moves, period. In addition to that, there is also an ability in the game called Lightning Rod, where electric moves have no effect in a double battle if a ground Pokemon is in play with that ability. This is the exact opposite effect of what happens in the show. If all this sounds bad, yeah, it gets worse. This technique was later retconned in the show itself. In the Diamond and Pearl series, the Lightning Rod ability makes its first appearance as an ability of course, a Rhydon, neutralizing Pikachu's Thunderbolt. But perhaps an even more egregious retcon is back in the original series, during Ash's 4th round fight against Janine's Bellsprout. In it, Pikachu uses Thunder, but Bellsprout is unfazed. As Jeanette explains,
Bellsprout's legs look a pair of teeny tiny lightning rods. Those electric attacks just won't work, Ash.
Sound familiar? It should, because it's the exact same logic used to explain the exact opposite effect of Pikachu's Thunderbolt. Overall, very sloppy, but hey, the memes are pretty good, I guess. Four Kids albums. Throughout their time as the dubbers of the Pokemon anime in the US, 4Kids had released several albums with music from throughout their run of the series. Some are a bit basic, such as the release of the first movie album which, you guessed it, contains music from Mewtwo Strikes Back.
Brother, my brother, tell me what are we fighting for? We got to end this war.
Some, however, are a bit more interesting, such as the To Be a Master album, which contained a lot of 4Kids original music, such as the titular To Be a Master, Viridian City, What Kind of Pokemon Are You?
What kind of Pokemon are you?
Yeah.
And, of course, the original theme song.
I wanna be the very best, like no one ever was. To catch them is my real test, to train them is my cause.
There's also the follow-up, Totally Pokemon, with Johto music, such as the Johto Journey's theme song,
It's a whole new world we live in. It's a whole new way to see. It's a whole new place with a brand new attitude. But you still gotta catch 'em all. Be the best that you can be. Pokemon Johto.
Two Perfect Girls,
Jenny, oh Jenny, joy, oh joy. A one-woman man's what I wanna be, but there's two perfect girls for me.
and Pikachu I Choose You.
You know that you're the one, so I choose you. There's no one outside of
There's lots of other albums out there as well, but perhaps the most interesting of them all is the Pokemon Christmas Bash. As the name suggests, it's a Christmas album with mostly original songs sung by the voice cast of the original series. This album is wild. In it, we hear the Pokedex dropping freaking rap bars,
Christmas, the time of year for peace on earth and to spread good cheer. A bash, a rocking party, filled with fun where the laughter is hearty.
This is the first voice you hear in the album, as well as Meowth talking about how great Christmas is and how Yom Kippur is stinky,
St. Patrick's Day is dull, Arbor Day is boring, and who wants to go through all that Yom Kippurin?
and, most infamously, Ash and Misty singing about being under the mistletoe.
Ash, did you realize we're standing under the mistletoe?
Huh?
Ash, where are you going? I'm getting some Christmas cookies. You just got some cookies.
Madness, I say. Truly madness. Pikachu's ketchup obsession. This is sort of a running gag throughout the series, though calling it that is a bit of a stretch. We'll get to why. Either way, it all starts in episode 39 of the original series, Showdown at Dark City. In it, we see Pikachu eating ketchup throughout the episode, and thoroughly enjoying it. We see him eating it in the restaurant, we see him bringing it out of the restaurant to continue eating it, we see him mourn the loss of it when a Scyther slices the bottle. It's great, it's cute, Pikachu's adorable. Now, take a guess at which episode next makes reference to Pikachu's love of ketchup. Later in the Indigo arc? Sometime during the Orange League? Early Johto? No. Episode 2 of the Advanced Generation. Over 200 episodes later, we see Pikachu eating ketchup from a bottle. Wanna know the next time after that? In X and Y. Season 17, Episode 30, Mega Revelations. After Karina uses the condiment to stamp Pikachu's paw print in her scrapbook, Pikachu eats the ketchup and chews in joy. That's over 450 episodes that go by before this shows up again. You see why I struggle to call this a running gag? Anyways, after that, we're off to the races, as X and Y would have the ultimate culmination of this gag in its 8th Japanese ending, Pikachu's Song. In this, we see Ash's Pikachu, alongside a bunch of other Pikachu, singing, dancing, and climbing giant ketchup bottles in celebration of their love of the condiment. Long live the Hinds! Rice balls. This is an onigiri, better known as a rice ball here in the West. As the name implies, it is a ball of sticky rice filled with all kinds of tasty stuff. It is also very Japanese. When you think of Japanese cuisine, you think of rice balls. For 4Kids, that was unacceptable. Japanese food? In a show made in Japan? We can't show that to American kids! And so, in episode 24 of the original series, Primate Goes Bananas, Brock calls and emphasizes that the rice balls he made for the group are jelly-filled donuts.
These donuts are great. Jelly-filled are my favorite. Nothing beats a jelly-filled donut.
And so, memery ensues. But this wasn't the only time that 4Kids censored rice balls in the show. They also censored them in the advanced generation. This time, they did things such as replace a giant rice ball with a giant hoagie, or replacing a rice ball that Team Rocket had with a cracker. As time went on, 4Kids eventually lost the dubbing rights to Pokemon, and so the rice ball was no longer censored. However, also as time went on, Pokemon as a brand became much, much larger, and so the anime slowly stopped using rice balls in the first place in order to have a much broader global appeal. Nowadays, you'll find the group more often than not eating sandwiches or soup than you will a rice ball. Either way, it's an interesting history. Pikachu's Jukebox. Pikachu's Jukebox was an end-of-show segment made for the English dub of Pokemon. It was a replacement for the Poke Rap that began after episode 52 of the show and continued until the start of the Johto series. This is the segment where you would hear a lot of the music associated with the 4Kids era of the show. To Be a Master, Viridian City, Together Forever, etc. and etc. Not much to say here, it's pretty straightforward and well known. Misty's Lure. Misty's Lure, or Misty's Special Lure as it's officially called, is a reoccurring item we see throughout the series. It makes its debut in the banned episode Legend of Dratini, but makes its English debut in Bye Bye Psyduck during the Orange Islands arc. Other appearances of the lure include the Totodile Duel and Hook, Line, and Stinker in the Johto series. In the Advanced Generation episode, The Unbeatable Lightness of Seeing, Ash receives the lure as a gift from Misty. Ash would later use this lure in Diamond and Pearl in Season 10, Episode 34, Weasel Your Way Out of This, even giving the lowdown about Misty to Dawn when he brings it up.
I've never seen a lure like that.
This? Cool, huh? I got this from Misty a long time ago.
Misty?
Right. She's a friend of ours who's now the Cerulean gym leader.
Oh.
And if you think Ash's lure is the one Misty lure out there, well, you're wrong. Misty also gives Lana a lure in Sun and Moon. I guess Misty just keeps lures in the shape of herself everywhere she goes. Beauty and the Beach. Beauty and the Beach is yet another banned episode from the original series, although it did get an English dub this time, framed as a lost episode. It's a beach episode. You know how beach episodes go. Ash and company get into shenanigans that lead to them destroying a boat, and the adult comedy antics only escalate from there. Contrary to popular belief, James's inflatable breasts weren't what actually caused this episode to get banned. No, the real reason the episode got banned was because of its overt sexualization of Misty, a character who is, at best, 12, and at worst, 10. Either way, yikes. We see this all throughout the episode. The old guy whose boat Ash and the gang destroys, he pervs on Misty. Hard. In addition, in order to pay off the boat, the gang enters Misty into a swimsuit competition, to which she says, quote,
This is totally embarrassing and degrading, but we need the money.
And finally, let's go back to the James booby scene. Take your eyes away from James's titties for a few seconds and actually listen to what Jessie is saying here. She's basically body-shaming Misty. calling her body immature and poking fun at her breast size compared to hers. Again, no matter how you slice it, Misty is prepubescent, so this is just all kinds of messed up. In the English dub, they changed a few things to try to make it less egregious. They changed what the old guy says to make it less pervy, though admittedly what they changed it to isn't that much better.
You remind me of my granddaughter.
And they completely removed the body shaming scene. However, the main plot of Misty entering a bikini competition is unchanged, and arguably can't be changed due to how central it is to the plot. And so, it hasn't re-aired since, nor can you find it on any streaming service, though this is one that I'm okay with letting slide. Sammy is Professor Oak. This entry is about how it is heavily suggested that Sammy from the 4th Pokemon movie is a young Professor Oak. There is lots of evidence that points towards this conclusion. Both Sammy and Professor Samuel Oak have the same first name. Sammy is said to have come from 40 years in the past, which lines up with Oak's age, and Sammy's physical appearance, such as his hair color and eye color, match that of what we know of a younger Professor Oak. The dagger, however, is at the end of the movie. When Ash discusses the events that just happened with Oak, Oak assures Ash that Sammy and them will always be friends.
True friendships can withstand the test of time, and I have a feeling this one will. I'm sure you and Sammy will be friends forever.
Oak says this despite the fact that Ash never told him Sammy's name, as pointed out by Misty.
Hey,
What's the matter, Misty?
how'd Professor Oak know Sammy's name? We never mentioned it to him.
Yeah, that's right.
All things considered, it is very likely, if not outright canon, that this theory is true. Swellow and Pikachu's Thunder Armor. This is a reference to a moment from Season 8, Episode 8, Solid as a Soul Rock from the Advanced series. In it, Ash is fighting Tate and Liza for the 7th Gym Badge, and is struggling against their defenses. Every attack he throws out is either blocked by a light screen or one of the other moves that the gym leaders have. Ash's ultimate solution to this is to have Pikachu use Thunderbolt on Swellow, giving it a golden Thunder Armor that allows Swellow to easily get past the gym leader's defenses. This makes a lot of fans very angry. To them, it is yet another example of Pokemon Anime logic, something that makes absolutely no sense and wouldn't work in the games and is a total Deus Ex Machina, and so on and so on and so on. In defense of the armor, get it? Defense of the armor? Anyway, in defense of the armor, Swellow was shown throughout the series to be particularly tough when it comes to electric attacks. Whether it's Pikachu using Thunder on it when Ash was trying to catch it as a Tailo, or the electric attacks it took during the Winona fight, Swellow has shown time and time again that electric moves just don't faze him. In addition, the anime has done move combinations and unique strategies like this one before and since, although Thunder Armor itself never came back. Personally, I like these anime exclusive techniques. They give more depth and strategy around the battles and make it feel more like an actual sport of this world instead of just another adaptation of a video game battle system. But hey, that's just me. Kiss with Latias. Full disclosure, I haven't watched Pokemon Heroes, so this might not be as accurate as I would like it to be. Anyway, this is a reference to the end of the 5th Pokemon movie, Pokemon Heroes. As the conflict ends and Ash and company leave to continue on their mind-numbing journey through Johto, Latias, transformed as a human named Bianca, goes to Ash for one last goodbye. In the moment, Latias kisses Ash on the cheek, and thus, Alto shipping was born. And even to this day, it is one of the stronger, more popular non-Ash X main girl ships in the community. How? I'd be more annoyed, but deep down I really know I'm just mad because Ash gets more action than I do. Trainer's Choice The Viper Error. Trainer's Choice was a mid-episode eye catch that was added to the English dub during the 2nd season of the Advanced generation. It basically was the replacement for Who's That Pokemon? This segment was notorious for being very bad, sometimes even giving out outright wrong information on something as basic as type matchups. The most infamous of these errors comes from Season 7, Episode 37, A Fan with a Plan. In this Trainer's Choice, it is asked,
Trainers, which one of these Pokemon evolves into Seviper? ever!
The correct answer is none of them, since Survivor doesn't evolve. However, instead, the segment claims that
Okay, trainers, if you chose Arbok, you were right!
which is completely wrong. Needless to say, Trainer's Choice was not very well liked. When 4Kids lost the rights to Pokemon, it was removed. In fact, mid-episode eye catches in their entirety actually went away from Pokemon after transition, with the rest of the Advanced Generation and all of Diamond and Pearl not having any in America. Eventually, however, they would come back in Best Wishes, with the return of Who's That Pokemon. Whether the inaccuracies of Trainer's Choice is to blame for the original removal is up for debate. Pokemon Karaoke-mon. Remember Pikachu's Jukebox, that end-of-show segment that replaced the Pokerap? Well, Pokemon Karaoke-mon was basically the replacement for Pikachu's Jukebox. It began at the start of the Johto arc in Season 3, and ended at the end of Season 3. The segment itself was basically Pikachu's Jukebox, but with different songs. Pretty much all the songs come from Totally Pokemon. We got Pikachu I Choose You,
You know there is no other. I choose you because you are my brother.
Two Perfect Girls,
Jenny, oh Jenny, joy, oh joy. A one-woman man's what I wanna be, but there's two perfect girls for me.
the song of Jigglypuff, etc. Again, not much to say here because it's a pretty well-known feature of the episodes, but it's a little more obscure since you have to watch the Johto series to see it instead of the vastly more popular first two seasons. Drying Pan. Like Aim for the Horn, this is another famous meme line from the show. This time, it comes from the TV special Mewtwo Returns. When the gang gets caught in a rainstorm, Rock takes out one of his cooking pans, puts it over his head, and proudly exclaims,
Hey, I know. I'll use my trusty frying pan as a drying pan.
This groan-worthy line has captivated the hearts and souls of Pokemon memers all around, with remixes, new puns, and all the sort of things you can think a meme like this can mutate into. The Legend of Dratini. This is yet another banned episode from the original series. In it, Ash and company enter the Safari Zone, where they hope to catch lots of Pokemon. Upon arrival, they meet Kaiser, the warden of the Safari Zone. When getting their Safari Balls from the warden, they learn about a Dratini that was spotted in the area a long time ago. Team Rocket overhears this and decides to find the Pokemon. Once allowed, Ash catches a bunch of Tauros, like a lot of them. Wow, that's a lot of Tauros, way too many Tauros. Anyway, Team Rocket eventually finds the Dratini, thanks to the Kaiser and some coercion. However, they ultimately fail when a Dragonair appears and they get sent blasting off again. The reason for this episode's banning is because of Kaiser's, and I guess Team Rocket for that matter, irresponsible use of guns. We see Kaiser pointing the thing directly at Ash's head, finger on the trigger, and everything. We also see Team Rocket use the gun as a way to threaten Kaiser. Both examples are extremely dangerous and a bit too much for a Y7 show like Pokemon. So, 4Kids decided not to dub it, not wanting children to imitate it with their parents' weapons. Now, the problem with skipping this episode comes when you realize that Ash catches a lot of Pokemon here, but that's brushed off in Showdown at the Poke Corral. As I write this in the wake of insert relative mass shooting in America here, not dubbing the episode is probably the right decision all things considered, even if I think it sucks that such an important episode just doesn't exist here. Voice actor change. I'm sure you're already aware of this one. Even if you never heard the story, if you watch the anime in English, you have been affected by this. Basically, in the mid-2000s, 4Kids lost the rights to dub Pokemon, and the Pokemon Company International decided to make the dub in-house. Actually, the dubbing responsibilities was given to a studio called Taj Productions, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to say that TPCI did it in-house. So they got a new dubbing studio and translators, the whole 9 yards. But the thing is, that also included new voice actors. Because the previous voice actors were paid so well at 4Kids, TBCI opted to get new voice actors instead of bringing back the old ones. They replaced Veronica Taylor with Sarah Natacheni as Ash. They replaced Eric Stewart with Bill Rogers for Brock. Rachel Lillis as Jessie and Misty with Michelle Knotts. The list goes on and on and on. This, if any recent voice actor controversy gave you a hint, did not go well with fans. They protested, signed petitions, and boycotted the show. Some people still, to this day, call for Sarah Natacheni to be removed and for Veronica Taylor to return as Ash. This was a dumb decision, but time heals all wounds, I guess. Sarah Natacheni has been the voice of Ash for longer than Veronica Taylor has been. There are entire generations of fans who grew up with her as the voice of Ash. I'm one of them. Sarah Natacheni is the voice of Ash to me. She's the one I grew up with as a kid. I'm nearly 20. So yeah, it sucks, but life goes on. But for those who are still outraged about this, take solace in the fact that the social media age has made a voice actor placement like this much, much harder and much, much rarer. James's voice changes mid-episode. Here's a slightly less well-known example of a voice actor change. Did you know that for the first 7 episodes, James wasn't voiced by Eric Stewart? Yeah, for episode 2 through 7, James's voice was completely different. During these episodes, he was voiced by a guy named Ted Lewis.
We seek only rare and valuable Pokemon.
Then, in episode 8, Path to the Pokemon League, Ted Lewis's voice was dropped mid-episode, and James's voice changed to the voice of Eric we knew and loved.
Your turn, coughing.
My best guess as to what happened is that Ted called in sick the day of recording, and the dubbers decided, hey, we're early enough into the show, no one would notice if we changed the voice. And so they got Eric Stewart to do the lines, loved his performance and chemistry with the other Team Rocket members, and decided to give him the role full-time. But don't feel too bad for Teddy though. He went on to voice both Tracy and Giovanni, and although he was replaced in the change from 4Kids to TPCI, Ted would eventually come back as the voice of Giovanni, being one of the few voice actors to survive the transition. Pokemon Chronicles. Pokemon Chronicles was a series of episodes that take place in the world of the Pokemon anime, but don't feature Ash prevalently. Instead, they focus on Ash's companions and several side characters. We have Misty and her adventures catching a Gyarados, Brock reuniting with his family, Richie on his own Pokemon journey, etc. and etc. The biggest event of Pokemon Chronicles, however, is the 3-part TV special Legend of Thunder, in which we see Jimmy, not Ethan, Maria, not Chris, and Vincent stopping Team Rocket from catching Raikou. Eventually, Pokemon Chronicles ended, but Pokemon specials without Ash would continue on in Japan. Dawn and Brock would get one each in Diamond and Pearl, Iris and Silent got some at the end of Best Wishes, and Clement and Bonnie got one at the end of X and Y. Overall, really interesting stuff, and I definitely would have liked to see more of this kind of stuff continue to be released here. Jinx censorship. So, Jinx. It's a Pokemon. I guess there's no better place to start than with the beginning. So, in the late 90s, an academic paper was released claiming that Jinx resembled the racist practice of blackface, in which white people painted their faces black and acted in a way that portrays people of color in a negative light. In the backlash of this, Jinx was recolored to be purple in all official artworks for the games. This purpling, obviously, also made its way into the anime, in which an entire Christmas special featuring Jinx working in a factory for Santa to build toys. Okay, that actually sounds bad now that I'm saying it out loud. An entire Christmas special featuring Jinx working in a factory for Santa to build toys was changed to have the new skin color. However, this redoing of an old episode was more the exception, not the rule. Instead, most episodes were removed from circulation. As of today, the Orange Islands episodes Stage Fight and the Mandarin Island Mismatch, which feature Jinx in minor roles, aren't available for streaming, and new box sets of the seasons don't contain the episodes, although older versions are still out there. The Johto episode titled The Ice Cave was never dubbed in English due to the prominence of Jinx in the episode. It's a total mess, but post-Advanced series episodes use the new colors, so we don't have to worry about this anymore. GS Ball. GS Ball, GS Ball, GS Ball. Oh man. For those of you who didn't go through this torturous arc, the GS Ball is an item from the early anime that was very important. Ash sets off on his journey through the Orange Islands specifically to retrieve the ball and bring it to Professor Oak. What happens from there? Let's do a quick recap, shall we? Professor Ivy has it, can't open it. It can't be transported by a Pokeball transport either, so Ash takes it and delivers it to Professor Oak. Oak, shocker, can't open it either, so he tells Ash to bring it to a guy named Kurt. Team Rocket steals it, then Ash gets it back. Quagsire steals it for an episode, and then Ash gets it back. And finally, it makes its way to Kurt, and he has no idea about it, but he keeps it to continue his research. Got all that? Good, because that's all that happens! That's all there is to this thing. It's never brought up again, we never see what was in it, nothing. Not very satisfying, is it? I sure think it isn't. This is a plot point that has soured with many fans. It's one of the biggest gripes a lot of them have with the Johto arc. The whole GS Ball thing feels pointless to them. Because it is. So, how the heck did this pointless story happen? Well, according to interviews with the staff, originally the GS Ball was going to have Celebi in it, and from there we would have gotten a major arc involving Celebi. However, after a production wrapped up on the third movie, it was decided that the fourth movie would revolve around Celebi. This came into conflict with the plans to have Celebi in the show, and instead of being smart and integrating the two together like with Mewtwo in the first movie, they decided to scrap the whole arc and just hope that everyone would forget. We didn't. The hole in the Johto arc from the fallout of this decision is massive. Johto League Champions, the second season of the Johto series, has only 14 episodes that are relevant to the plot. 14! In a 52 episode season. Everything else? Mindless filler. Filler that probably wouldn't have been there if there was a Celebi arc that was going on during the middle of it. Ugh. Wanna know the worst part of it all? 2 episodes. Just 2 episodes after the GS Ball was delivered to Kurt. Wanna know where Ash and company go to? The Ilex Forest and the Shrine of Celebi. Ah! You were right there! It was this close! You almost had it! Ah! Peekaboo. This is Meryl. Now I know what you're wondering. What's so great about Meryl? Well, in the olden days of the internet, there wasn't a Pokemon Direct that aired all across the globe, and the second it drops, there was a website that had all the information on the newest Pokemon. No, back in those days, things were a lot slower. A lot slower. And finding information about Pokemon was much harder. So when the news of a brand new Pokemon game started to make its way into the Pokemania-swept United States, rumors began to rumble. Meryl was one of the earliest Pokemon to be officially announced, but when the news began to come over to the US, the internet game of telephone slowly corrupted the truth, and Meryl suddenly became Peekaboo, the secret, final evolution of Pikachu that you, yes you, can get. All you gotta do is beat QB4 100 times, and then use a Water Stone on Raichu. Now, obviously, these were just internet lies, but they did have an impact beyond simple rumors on the playground. Topps, a trading card company, were making special cards for the release of the second Pokemon movie and its short, Pikachu's Vacation. In that short, we see Meryl in all its glory. However, Topps didn't have the name of the Pokemon on hand, and they had to find it for the description on the back of the card. And so they took to the internet, where they came across the name Peekaboo. And that's how the name Peekaboo got on the back of an officially licensed piece of Pokemon merchandise. GBA Video. The GBA Video line was a set of GBA game cards that had different TV shows and movies compressed onto the cartridge. Some examples of shows and movies in the line include episodes of SpongeBob and other Nicktoons, Shark Tales the movie, and freaking Shrek. Most important to our discussion, several Pokemon episodes were put onto these cartridges. We have episode 1, obviously, a few episodes from the Indigo arc, and even some Johto episodes. Pretty neat, all things considered, and definitely a fun little piece of the history of portable media watching before the advent of smartphones and streaming. 4Kids Airbrush Edits. Throughout their run, 4Kids would often edit out certain things in the anime, mostly to get rid of references to Japanese culture and cuisine, but occasionally for other reasons. We already talked about their censorship of rice balls into sandwiches and crackers, but that was just the tip of the iceberg. We also have matches changing into birthday candles, this ugly sign in front of AJ's gym, this poorly edited poster of Norman, this gross grass cutout, Brock with this weird prune can thing, and so on and so on and so on. Eventually, 4Kids lost the rights to the show, and a new studio was put behind localization. Does this mean that there was less edits? Yes. Does it mean that edits were gone entirely? No. For modern edits, we have things like changing the adult's drinks to not be alcohol, and changing this guy's mustache to make him look less like Hitler. It's all stupid, but I'm glad it's becoming less prevalent. Mother and daughter in the movies. If you can recall the beginning of Lucario and the Mystery of Mew, you'll remember that it starts with a mother telling her daughter the story of Sir Aaron and Lucario, the story that opens the film. Well, this duo ended up becoming a recurring Easter egg, appearing in almost all the movies that came out after Lucario, and even a few episodes of the show. So, who are these people? Well, officially, nothing has been said, but there are some possibilities that have been floating around. One idea is that it is the wife and daughter of an animator or storyboarder that is put in as an homage. Another, less wholesome possibility is that it simply reused designs and animation that are more easy to implement. So, with the who out of the way, let's talk about the unofficial fan theories. The most famous of the theories involving these two is the one that claims that all of the Pokemon anime doesn't exist. Ash? Pikachu? All those colorful creatures? Yeah, it's all just a bedtime story told by the mother. Some other interpretations of this theory also claims that the anime started out as a bedtime story by the mother, but then eventually became a story the daughter made up in her imagination as a continuation of her mother's story, which is why the two appear in almost every movie. What, you didn't self-insert yourself in your stories as a child? Do I believe in these theories? No, but it's still interesting to think about nonetheless. Pokemon Heroes Blue Tint. This was the first entry I knew nothing about going into this, but apparently almost 90% of the DVD and Blu-ray re-releases of the film Pokemon Heroes have a blue tint on them, compared to the original theatrical release and the VHS release. I don't really know why that is. Some say that it's a byproduct of how the movie was mastered for DVD, others say that it was an artistic choice on the part of the English localizers. Either way, it's an interesting thing that happened, and even more weird how it wasn't changed, or even given as an option to be changed on the Blu-ray re-releases. Pokemon Live. Pokemon Live was a theatrical musical set in the world of the Pokemon anime. The story follows Ash and the gang as they take down Giovanni's most dastardly invention, Mecha Mewtwo, a robot Pokemon that knows almost every move. Along the way, we get tons of musical numbers with songs from the 4Kids era that we've already discussed, some weird Poke shipping stuff, and some background on Delia that we'll get to later. Anyway, this show ran during the early 2000s. There were talks about a home media release and a pro shot, but they fell through due to lack of financial incentives. That being said, the entirety of the show is available to watch on YouTube, so you can do that if you want. Pikachu's Winter Vacation. Pikachu's Winter Vacation is a series of several Christmas specials centered around Pikachu and friends. It was released in the late 90s and early 2000s, with the most well-known episodes being released around the Johto series. In the US, most of these shorts were direct-to-VHS specials. In them, we see Pikachu and friends doing things such as hanging around a cabin during a cold winter's day with the snow pouring down, playing in the snow outside, playing winter-themed games, helping Santa's Stantlers, etc. and etc. All around pretty boring, but inoffensive, I guess. Lieutenant Surge swears in episode 14. So, in the Japanese version of Electric Shock Showdown, Lieutenant Surge has a faux American accent, and it is about as English as you think it is.
What? Pikachu? Hey, look! Baby no Pokemon wa yappari baby da ze.
Anyway, because of this, Surge uses a handful of English words, and this entry references how a swear word is one of them. During the rematch against Surge, Pikachu uses agility to start the fight, catching Surge off guard. Surge reacts to this by saying, "God damn," in English.
Goddamn! Raichu!
This was obviously changed in the dub, where Surge simply says, "Okay."
Okay, Raichu. Give it a thunderbolt.
But yeah, it's pretty interesting how you can get away with a lot of stuff like that if it's in a language your audience doesn't understand. Alternate continuity, Ash is a girl. Welp, this is it. This is the one that stumped me. I couldn't find anything satisfying for this entry, and I genuinely have no clue what this is. I have information on almost every other entry, even the ones at the bottom layer. Heck, even the ones that I wasn't sure of, I still had something I felt satisfied with. But this one was just too far beyond. So, the following entry will mostly, if not entirely, be pure speculation on my part. But first, I'll mention what little I did find. In the hype cycle around Power of Us, a handful of fans made mock-ups of Ash as a girl. This doesn't satisfy me as an answer. A gender bend? On the internet? I'm shocked! But yeah, since Power of Us is taking place in a different continuity from the original anime, it's not that much of a logical leap to think that Ash could be a girl in some future movie. Do I think it will happen? No. If they want to make a movie centering around a female lead, they'll make a new female lead, not change an already established character. Anyway, now on to my speculation. Now, there are two things that this entry could possibly be about to me: Ash's cross-dressing tendencies and the Mirror Cave. First, Ash's cross-dressing. Throughout the series, Ash cross-dresses. A lot. He does it in the original series to get into the Celadon gym. He does it in the advanced generation to help a guy named Romeo ask a girl named Juliet out. He dresses up as a maid for a maid cafe during Diamond and Pearl because maid boys are so in right now. All this to say, Ash, flirting with the feminine side? Not that uncommon. Do I think this is what the entry is referencing? No. It specifically states that Ash is a girl in an alternate continuity, so Ash being feminine in the main series wouldn't fit that. Now, the next theory. Let's talk about the Mirror Cave. In Season 17, Episode 36, aptly titled The Cave of Mirrors, Ash and company travel through a cave where the main gimmick is that it has surfaces that are incredibly reflective and mirror-like. But these aren't just any mirrors, they're actually mirrors to other dimensions! And in this episode, Ash gets stuck in an alternate dimension. In this dimension, he meets an alternate Ash, as well as an alternate Clement, Bonnie, and Serena. The big difference between Ash and crew we know and tolerate versus this one is that Ash is a crybaby, Serena isn't unbearable, Clement is a speedy wizard instead of a slow scientist, and Bonnie is very polite. Now, what this demonstrates to us for this conversation is that there is evidence to outright prove the existence of alternate dimensions in the world of the anime. So, if there's a universe where Ash is a pushover, why can't there be a universe where Ash is a girl? Sounds like me pulling a bunch of strings that don't connect together, right? Right, that's why it's speculation. Sorry. Mewtwo Strikes Back Kanzaban. In 1998, Mewtwo Strikes Back was first released in Japanese theaters. Shortly thereafter, it aired on Japanese television, but this version on TV was different from the one folks saw in the theaters. Certain animations were cleaned up, more CGI was added in, and a certain intro that we'll come back to later was added. This version of the movie is known as Mewtwo Strikes Back Kanzaban. If it helps get your head around it, think of it this way. Remember how Star Wars had a special edition re-release with new CGI and special effects that became the base for all versions of the movies moving forward? Think of the Kanzaban version like that. It's Mewtwo Strikes Back, Special Edition. When the movie came to the US, this version of the film is the one the dubbers received, and it was this version that was released here in American theaters, minus the new intro, which brings us to... The Birth of Mewtwo. The Birth of Mewtwo is a short that goes over the events of Mewtwo's creation. It starts with the discovery of Mew's eyelash and goes into the events of Mewtwo's early life. The short started out as the intro to the Kanzaban version of Mewtwo Strikes Back. This intro was cut from the release of the US version of the movie, as 4Kids thought it was too dark for US children. However, it was later released as a bonus feature for the DVD of Mewtwo Returns with a full English dub, titled The Uncut Origin of Mewtwo. And honestly, the Mewtwo Returns DVD is really an uncut origin of Mewtwo DVD with some bad TV special attached to it. I love the uncut origin of Mewtwo. It's one of my favorite stories ever told in Pokemon. It's dark yet beautiful, nuanced and interesting. It sheds a whole new light on Mewtwo as a character, giving his existential crisis more layers. And the short's just plain cool. If you're a Pokemon fan, you owe it to yourself to watch this short. Brock is a stereotype. So, have you ever wondered why Brock was written out of the Orange Islands arc and replaced by some pasty white dude, only to return a season later? Well, according to the show's staff, that's because they thought that the American audience would think that Brock was a stereotype of Asian people. At a very, very surface level glance, it kinda makes sense. Brock has those thin eyes that were used in propaganda against Asian people all throughout American history. However, as the creators soon realized, when you go deeper, it starts to fall apart. First of all is that Brock isn't portrayed in a negative light as a stereotype would. Yeah, he's a womanizer, and kinda dumb at times, but he's also a loyal, responsible, caring person. Positive traits that he just wouldn't have if he was meant to portray a people group in a harmful way. It also falls apart when you consider that they didn't actually ask the people that they were worried about misportraying, Asians and specifically Asian Americans, what they thought and whether they viewed Brock as someone who was harmful to their image. And lastly, and perhaps the most obvious, Pokemon is a show written and storyboarded by Japanese artists. Why would they write themselves in a stereotypical way? Pokemon soon realized this, as previously stated, and brought Brock back for the Johto arc. And he would stay with the show all the way up to Diamond and Pearl, and he even appears in a few episodes after that. Brock's mom plot hole. Staying on the topic of Brock, let's talk about this unnecessary plot hole. Recall episode 5, when Ash is walking with Flint in the streets of Pewter City. Flint explains that after Brock's father left, his mother would end up dying, leaving Brock to take care of his brothers and sisters all by himself. It's dark, it's tragic, yada yada yada. Anyway, fast forward to Pokemon Chronicles. After Brock leaves Ash and Misty at the end of the Johto series, he returns to Pewter City to find that someone has taken over the gym. Who is this person? Lola, Brock's mother. What's going on? Well, you see, Flint saying that Brock's mother died wasn't actually in the original Japanese. In that version, Flint simply says that his mother also abandoned him. 4Kids, I guess not to give Brock two terrible parents, didn't translate this line and instead made up a new backstory, not realizing that Lola would eventually come back. But yeah, really stupid plot hole that could have been avoided if 4Kids just did their job and translated it correctly. Leo Burnett and 4Kids are the devil. This comes from Season 3, Episode 12, The Whistle Stops. When James releases his victory bell, it bites on his head, as it does most of the time. But instead of screaming, James actually speaks. What he says, however, is backwards.
Victory Bell 2!
When played in reverse, we hear him say,
Leo Burnett and 4 kids of the devil, Leo Burnett.
Now, who is Leo Burnett? And why is James so angry at him that he would call him the devil? Well, Leo Burnett isn't actually a person. It's an advertising company. And Eric Stewart, the voice of James, was angry because of a pay dispute. You see, as part of a deal between 4Kids and the advertisers, the voice actors wouldn't get paid for the use of their clips in commercials and bumpers for TV breaks. Eric said that he made a lot more money from the commercials than from voicing the actual show, and specifically pointed out that the money he made from commercials was what paid for his healthcare. So the line was added as a protest to these changes. In the current version of the episode on streaming services, James's line is replaced with the generic scream.
Victory Bell 2.
But yeah, this one's really neat. So interesting seeing a little piece of behind-the-scenes drama getting into an actual episode. Lenora censorship. In the 3 episodes of Black and White that Lenora, the Nakarine City gym leader, appears in, her clothes are changed between the English and Japanese versions. In Japanese, she is seen wearing an apron, while in English, she isn't. This change was made in the West as it was thought that the apron made Lenora look too much like the mammy stereotype. Don't know what a mammy is? Well, it's a stereotype of older black women as big, unintelligent caregivers that has its roots in American slavery. Think the whole Aunt Jemima thing 10 years before the Aunt Jemima thing happened. Anyway, yeah, probably the smart idea to remove such a small thing. Especially in hindsight, where I could easily see this episode getting pulled off of streaming services because of it. Oak and Delia are a couple.
Well, everybody, welcome to Shiptown. I'm surprised it took us this long to get here.
Anyway, this entry is about the long-running ship of Professor Oak and Delia Ketchum, Ash's mother. They spend a lot of time together. Oak gets invited to dinner with Delia, Ash, and the crew a lot. Delia and Ash get invited to go on trips with Oak. I mean, that's literally how Black and White starts off. And whenever we need Ash to have support from Palatown, it's always Delia and Oak. Do I believe this ship is canon? No. Oak is Gary's grandfather. Do you know how weird it would be for Gary to have to call Ash his uncle? Plus, there's the whole age difference. Oak is in his late 50s, early 60s, while Delia is 29 at the start of the series, and still probably isn't older than her 30s. So yeah, that's a no from me. Team Rocket vs. Team Plasma. This one kinda sucks to talk about. So, the original plan for Best Wishes, the Black and White anime, was for Team Rocket to be a serious threat. There was this huge plan for Team Rocket to try to take over the Unova region, and to ultimately come to clash with the homegrown evil villains of the region, Team Plasma. This arc was building up throughout the first few episodes of Black and White, and it was culminating in this epic showdown in Castelia City, where Team Rocket and Plasma would face off directly for the first time. A venipede infestation in the episode before was leading up to it. Everything on the stage was set up for a giant 2-part special. Then, tragedy struck. On March 11th, 2011, less than a week before the episode was set to broadcast, a massive earthquake and tsunami ripped into the Japanese coast, completely obliterating nearby cities. The Fukushima nuclear power plant sustained massive damage, causing a meltdown that released tons of radioactive material into the area, becoming the worst nuclear disaster since Chernobyl. Almost 20,000 people were killed. The episode was delayed due to its similarities to the disaster. The television network insisted that it would be aired, as it was an incredibly important episode for the plot of the series. But as the days went on, it was abundantly clear that this earthquake would be one of the worst that Japan had experienced in almost 100 years. The episode was shelved. The show went on without the special. Ash went on his journey, and we wouldn't hear from Team Plasma until after the Unova League, where the events of this special were officially made non-canon. For the girls. I'm not quite sure about this one, but my best guess is that this is a reference to the fact that Pikachu wasn't originally going to be Ash's partner Pokemon. Originally, that role was going to Clefairy. We even see something like this happen in one of the early mangas. But then it was decided for Ash's partner Pokemon to change from Clefairy to Pikachu. Why? Because the higher-ups thought Pikachu would be more appealing to women, with his cute mouse-like appearance and bright yellow colors. Seeing as Pikachu is now a global icon, I'd say it worked out in the end. The Ash Coma Theory. Ash Ketchum does not age. That's simply how it is. Why? Because he's a cartoon character, that's why. Bart Simpson never ages, we never question it. SpongeBob never ages, we never question it. Stewie Griffin never ages, we never question it. Why can't we just give Ash that treatment as well? To some fans, that is too much to give, and so they've come up with theories to explain why he never ages. One of the most popular of these theories is the Ash Coma Theory. This claims that the bolt of lightning that struck at the end of the first episode actually put Ash in a coma, and the rest of the series is him dreaming about the adventures he goes on. Yeah, I don't buy this theory at all. I much prefer the Ash multiverse theory to explain why he doesn't age. Even then, at this point, I've come to terms with the fact that a decade has passed since I first watched the show, and Ash is still 10 years old. It sucks, but such is life. Pikachu's goodbye exists because of the Porygon incident. There's a lot of speculation when it comes to this topic, so let's just start off with the facts. Pikachu's Goodbye was the first episode that aired after the fallout of the Porygon incident. Based on the original TV scheduling before the incident, that wasn't planned to be the case. So what happened between then and the airing? Well, currently, there are two theories about what happened. The first is that they chose this episode because of its stronger narrative focus and its more intimate, character-driven story. They wanted to show that Pokemon wasn't just some flashy action show that was all about the bright lights and colors. It was a genuine show with emotions and ideas that would resonate with audiences. The second theory is a lot less dramatic and storybook, but also a lot more likely. Basically, Pikachu's Goodbye was an episode that was much easier to storyboard and animate. Not counting flashbacks, the only Pokemon species that appears in this episode is Pikachu and Meowth, the fewest number of Pokemon species to appear in an episode to this day. Having less Pokemon species means less animation work. In addition, there's a lot of flashbacks in this one, especially towards the end, as well as scenes where not a lot is going on visually. Is it still great TV? Yes. Was it harder to make from an animation perspective? No, or at least not nearly as much as the average. So, seeing as the scheduling was a lot tighter between when the show was re-greenlit for broadcast and the first episode airing, it was decided to move this one up in order to have a show out on time. Pokemon 3D and 4D. This entry references two short films, Pokemon 3D Adventure, Find Mew, and Pokemon 4D, Pikachu's Grand Ocean Floor Adventure. Both of these shorts were made in the mid-2000s. I couldn't get a straight answer as to whether they were made in 3D or if they were adapted into 3D later on, but either way, they were both re-released in 3D in Japanese theaters in 2017. Despite its title, Pokemon 4D isn't in 4D as far as I'm aware, although it was part of a theater ride here in the United States at one point, so perhaps there was some 4D stuff going on there. As you can guess by that last statement, the 4D one was dubbed in English, while the 3D one, Never Leaving Japan, wasn't. There really isn't much to say about these ones. The 3D shorts plot synopsis on Bulbapedia is like a sentence long, and the 4D one just straight up doesn't have one, so let's move on. Misty and Jessie's mallet. Throughout some of the early episodes, Misty would be seen using a mallet, often to hit either Ash or Brock when they do something stupid. As time went on and the show moved forward, Misty's mallet was used less and less. Why? Well, it was either one of two things. 1, the deuteragonist using a mallet for violence was messing with the show's ratings and it had to be dropped, or 2, the mallet gag wasn't all that funny in the first place and the writers couldn't come up with any creative new ideas for it, so it was eventually dropped. Similarly, Jessie also had a mallet used for physical gags, and one that lasted a bit longer. Due to her status as a villain, it was a bit more palatable to have her use blunt violence, and use it she did. Her mallet came in metal and squeaky variety. The gag lasted well into the advanced generation. Eventually, however, Jessie became more and more reliant on a giant fan to smack James and Meow, and either because it was easier to animate or because the writers thought it was funnier, the fan won out, and it was Jessie's go-to voice for dealing the damage. Pokemon Learning League. Pokemon Learning League was a website aimed to teach elementary school kids. It had lessons on stuff like science, math, language, social interaction, so on and so forth. This one gets on here because it uses several characters from the anime, and even some clips during its lessons. There are very few fragments of the content of this website left on the internet, enough to where the Lost Media Archives felt the need to add it as an entry on its website, although there have been some new findings more recently. All around, it's a really interesting piece of lost media. And side note here, I just wanted to point out something that caught my eye. So, Dawn, right? She's in this game because it's the late 2000s and Diamond and Pearl was the current series at the time. But here's the thing, I guess the creators of this program thought that Dawn's design was too scantily clad, and so they gave her a Mythra and Smash Bros. Styled redesign with an undershirt and leggings. And I just find that both fascinating and amusing. Okay, side note over. Brock and Misty's last names. Much like the mystery of Obama's last name, the last name of Brock and Misty is a mystery that also exists. So, what are their last names? Well, Brock's last name is Harrison. Kinda. You see, that doesn't come from the writers of the show. Brock doesn't have a last name in Japan. Instead, the last name Harrison comes from a 2007 interview with Eric Stewart, the voice of Brock and one of the voice directors of the dub. So yeah, Brock's last name is Harrison, at least in English. As for Misty, well, Misty doesn't have a last name. She just doesn't. There were rumors through the internet that her last name was Waterflowers or Williams, Waterflowers in particular being popular among fanfics, but as far as I can tell, both seem to me not true, and the mystery of what Misty's last name is still unsolved. Personally, my headcanon is that her last name is her Japanese name, Kasumi. I know that probably makes zero sense to a Japanese audience, but it's better than nothing. Pokemon de English. Pokemon de English was a TV programming segment meant to teach Japanese children some basic English. This was done using segments of episodes from the English dub to teach very specific phrases and words. The English words and phrases taught included greetings, colors, numbers, food, and a whole bunch more. Honestly, this is actually kinda cool, and I would have liked to see something like this here in the West, but in reverse, using Japanese clips to teach Americans Japanese. Misty slaps Ash. This one is a reference to a change 4Kids made in the very first episode, as well as a few from later on. Misty, after reeling in Ash from the river, and upon seeing how badly Pikachu was hurt, slaps Ash for being so negligent of his Pokemon's condition. In English, the slap was removed, and Misty just yells at him very loudly.
I am the greatest!
You're the worst! You have no idea what you're doing!
The reasoning, as far as I can tell, was because 4Kids didn't want a protagonist like Misty to use that kind of physical violence in the show. The kind that you can reasonably see a child trying to imitate. Misty can use a giant hammer all she wants, because a kid wouldn't have access to one of those to repeat the stunt. But slapping is something a kid can totally do, so it was cut. I personally don't really mind it, but hey, what do I know?
Boys need a new piece of eye candy.
Let's get this over with. This is Matsumitsu Hidaka. He was the director of the Pokemon anime until the Battle Frontier, and a storyboard artist until Best Wishes. He also directed and storyboarded several of the movies. All around, he was a pretty important person to the show. In 2008, Hidaka had an interview with the fan site PokeBeach. In it, he discussed several things. This is the interview where we learn about why Brock left during the Orange Islands and why the GS ball was dropped. But the most infamous piece of behind-the-scenes information that was brought to light in this interview was about the change of companions. According to Hidaka, the reason that they switched from Misty to May and May to Dawn and so on and so forth was because, quote, boys need new pieces of eye candy to look at every once in a while. They want new girls and new clothing, especially swimsuits. God, I threw up a little in my mouth. It's so gross. This was a shocking reveal. Even the interviewer was baffled. It's just so gross and messed up to think that the characters we knew and enjoyed were solely there for male gazing. Not to mention the whole they're 10 thing. Yeah, it's gross. So, the following segment is me hopping up on Copium to find some way to make this less awful for my conscience. My headcanon is that when Hidaka says that line, he means it less as a, damn, we gotta make these 10-year-olds hot, and more of a, let's do baby's first waifu war. You see, when you have such a colorful cast of characters, fans will begin to debate on who's the best, and will buy the merch to show their undying support. Pokemon, who makes the merchandise for all the companions, profit off it either way. Yeah, it's a roundabout way of thinking about this quote, but it lets me sleep well at night. Barbaroach versus Whiscash. Looks like we got ourselves another band episode. Though this one isn't as well known as the others, it's still just as important. The episode, titled Shaking Island Battle, Barbaroach vs. Whiscash, was supposed to be episode 101 of the Advanced Generation, and like the two-part Black and White special, it was unaired because of a recent earthquake, this time on Niigata in late 2004. This one wasn't as plot relevant as the Black and White one, but it was where Ash was supposed to learn where the final Hoenn gym was. So now in later episodes, they just say Ash is going to the Zootopolis gym without questioning how he knows where that place is.
Then it's off to Zootopolis City, where Ash hopes to earn his 8th and final gym badge.
This episode is also important because, from this point on, moves such as Earthquake, Fissure, and Magnitude were banned from being used in episodes as an unwritten rule, to avoid an episode getting unaired due to a real-life earthquake again. I mean, it worked for a couple of years. Pokemon Radio Show. Pokemon Radio Show is a reference to Team Rocket's Secret Empire, a radio broadcast from 2012. It features the Japanese voices of Jessie, James, and Meowth trying to recruit new members to Team Rocket. The show was later released in 4 CDs in 2013, compiling the show and preserving it. Another fun fact about this project is that it started by Jessie's Japanese voice actor going to the sound director of the Pokemon anime and asking for a late-night show. He approved, so that's neat. PokeRap GS was meant to be paired with Johto League champions. PokeRap GS was the follow-up to the original PokeRap, featuring Pokemon from the Johto region. It occasionally was used as a theme song for Pokemon Chronicles, but later episodes would drop it. This song, however, would be released in full as part of the Spell of the Unknown's DVD release as a bonus, and this is where the entry comes in. You see, at the end credits of the song, it says, quote, will be added to the end of Season 4 TV episodes. This pretty much all but confirms that at one point the GS PokeRap was supposed to be the end of episode segment for Johto League Champions, the way the original PokeRap was for the first season, but plans changed before then. ANA Shorts. This one is a reference to several Pikachu shorts that were used as in-flight entertainment for All Nippon Airways planes, or ANA. There were actually quite a few of them, spanning from the late Advanced Generation all through DP and even into early Black and White. We got Pikachu and company at a summer festival, Pikachu and friends going to an unowned dimension, and just generally Pikachu and Pokemon doing cute things. Team Rocket radio drama CDs. In the lead up to the release of Mewtwo Strikes Back in Japan, Japanese radio got a radio drama titled The Birth of Mewtwo. This radio drama followed the story of how Mew's eyelash was discovered and the early stages of Mewtwo's experimentation. If that sounds familiar, it should, because this radio drama was later adapted into the uncut origin of Mewtwo short that would air before the movies in Japan, and that we would get in the Mewtwo Returns DVD. However, there is stuff within this radio drama that didn't make its way into the anime adaptation. The biggest example is how this radio drama gives us tons of background information on Jesse's mother, Miyamoto. She was a member of Team Rocket, and part of the team that was sent to find Mew, but got lost soon after finding the Pokemon and was presumed dead by the organization. Madame Boss, the former leader of Team Rocket and Giovanni's mother, made a request to Giovanni to protect Miyamoto's child as her dying wish, since she was her favorite member. All around really interesting, and just goes to show how in-depth and full of lore the expanded universe of the first movie is. Animals in the Pokemon world. I don't know why this one is so far down. I thought it was pretty well known at this point, but yes, throughout the Pokemon anime, and especially during the early years when a lot of the conventions and world building wasn't as set in stone, there are several instances where real, non-Pokemon animals are shown or are suggested to exist. There's the classic, obvious examples, such as the fish in the shipwrecked St. Anne episode, as well as the fish in Nastina's aquarium in Tentacool and Tentacool. There's also some less obvious, but still pretty blatant examples, like Ash wearing a cow costume in Challenge of the Samurai. And for a non-first season example, there's X and Y's Going for the Gold, in which several undersea creatures are seen. All around, it's pretty obvious that when they first started, they weren't so sure if Pokemon were the only creatures around, and even as time went on, it was probably a lot easier to draw some generic animals instead of having to draw very specific Pokemon for background scenes. But yeah, there are real animals in the Pokemon anime world. Pre-Porygon versions of Episode 1 through 37. After the controversy surrounding the Porygon episodes, several changes were made to how the anime was animated. Flashing, strobing lights weren't used as much, rapid color changes were gone, so on and so forth. But these changes weren't just made for episodes moving ahead, they were also applied to the episodes that were already made. Episodes 1 through 37 were re-edited to reduce the harmful light effects that were used in them. Unlike modern anime, however, the change wasn't just a simple dimming of the lights, although that certainly was used. They also made the frame rate much slower, as well as removing frames, making the flashing lights less rapid, to the point where the light issue would no longer be a problem. All around, pretty fascinating. It's really cool to see a side of these episodes that, unless you were in Japan when it first happened, you've probably never seen before. Giovanni is Ash's father. The mystery of who Ash's father is one that's been with the show for forever, with many fans speculating as to who it could be. One of the more popular theories is that Giovanni, head of Team Rocket, is Ash's father. They kinda look similar. It fits with the whole, "No, I am your father" trope. Plus, they live relatively close to each other, being only one city down. The biggest piece of evidence that proponents of this theory use, however, comes from Pokemon Live, that musical we talked about several layers ago. In it, it is explicitly stated that Delia, Ash's mother, and Giovanni have a past.
Delia? Oh, good to see you again. You look lovely.
Leave her alone!
You and me back together. Imagine that.
That sounds pretty solid, until you consider the other parts of the show. Specifically later on, when Delia explains how, when she was a teenager, she would hang out with troublemakers that would later become Team Rocket, which is how she met Giovanni, but that she left them when she met Ash's father, explicitly stating that Giovanni is not his father.
I don't mean to pry, but, what did Giovanni mean? About you and he being back together again?
I might as well tell you. I'm sure it will all come out when he gets back. I wasn't always the upstanding woman you know. As a teenager, I fell in with a bad crowd, and there was just one boy. He started a gang that eventually became Team Rocket.
The boy was Giovanni?
Well, I didn't stay with him long. When I met Ash's father, I put all that behind me.
Does Ash know?
No, and he mustn't.
In addition, it can be argued that this segment entirely isn't canon to the story, as it goes against the story that was established in the Team Rocket radio drama, which, while not as canon as an episode of the show, does have more weight since it was written by the show's creator. All in all, while this theory is kinda neat, there is zero doubt in my mind that it is completely false. T-Rex version of the third movie. This is Takeshi Shudo. He was the head writer and showrunner of the Pokemon anime during the original series, and is often credited as the father of the Pokemon anime. He is really important, and to be frank, I'm kinda surprised we haven't talked about him yet. Anyways, the thing to note about Shudo for this entry is that he, self-medicated as a way to cope with his struggles with mental illness and depression, and that bled a lot into his writings. Rather infamously, he had written all 3 of the original Pokemon movies while under the influence of drugs and alcohol, which brings us to this entry and his first script for the third movie. His original idea was nothing at all like the movie we got. In it, a Pokemon archaeologist would find a T-Rex fossil, not a fossil of a Pokemon that resembles a T-Rex, an actual fossil of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. From this discovery, the story would unfold as the fossil would come to life and we'd discover how Pokemon came to be and how the animals we know from the real world went extinct. This story got rejected, obviously. Shudo insisted that it was rejected because it was too complicated and too much of a status quo change, but the reality was that it was rejected because the story probably wasn't that good. And seeing as the final story for the actual movie is really great, it definitely was the right move. Even still, it's weird to think about how we almost got such an odd concept. UK Poke Rap. In the United Kingdom, the Poke Rap was changed a fair bit. Most of these changes were due to how the scheduling and TV broadcasts differed from the UK and the US. For example, the
Don't go away! The Poke Rap is next!
bit was removed since UK broadcasts only had one commercial break, making the segment pointless. In addition, any references to the days of the week were removed, since most broadcasts didn't do a Monday through Friday release as the Poke Rap would suggest. Pokemon newspaper strip. In the early 2000s, there was a newspaper comic based on the Pokemon anime that was released. Well, I say based on the anime, but really they're completely different in terms of story, and art style, and tone, and character personality, and quality. Really, the only thing that they have in common is that they take place in a world with creatures called Pokemon, starring a kid named Ash, with his partner Pokemon named Pikachu, and his friends named Misty and Brock. Outside of that, yeah, very different. I would go into more detail about this comic, but honestly, Animated Ginger already made a fantastic video about this strip, and he does a far better job covering it than I ever could. Pretty much all my footage for this segment comes from it, and if you want to know more about this subject, I highly recommend watching his video. Hiroki. Hiroki is a character from the Diamond and Pearl series, although in the dub, he was called Hamilton. He was a Krogunt trainer in Season 11, Episode 28, Cream of the Krogunt Crop. On a surface level, he doesn't seem that much different from your average character of the day, so why is he here? Well, the reason for that is because of his original design. In the first airing of the episode, Hiroki heavily resembled the main character of a manga called The Konjageru. And when I mean heavily resembled, I mean he looks like a carbon copy. So, when the higher-ups at Pokemon saw this, they thought, wow, this is very on the nose, and we can get sued. And so, in later airings of the episode, his design was completely changed, and the character looked nothing at all like the original. This version is the one we got here in the West, so a lot of people who watched the dub probably don't even know about this change. Well, now you do. Pikachu and Pichu is banned in Japan. Pikachu and Pichu was the 7th Pikachu short, and it was released alongside the 3rd Pokemon movie. You know this short. It's the one that confirms that at least 1 year has passed since the beginning of the series. But that's something you already know. Here's something you probably didn't. This episode is actually banned in Japan. Yeah, releases of the 3rd movie on DVD and Blu-ray don't feature the short anymore, and airings of the movie on TV don't play the short film before either. Now why is that? Well, it all has to do with the voice actress of the narrator, Natori Saki. In 2009, she was arrested for possession and use of drugs. Because of the arrest, the shirt was banned in order to not be associated with the scandal. Personally, I think that's a bit extreme, especially with what we know about Takeshi Shudo's heavy drug use. And he's far more important to Pokemon than Saki, but hey, what do I know? Cursing Pokemon. Throughout the show, and other adjacent animes to the main Pokemon show, there are occasions where certain characters curse. Well, kinda. One example that is cited by lots of fans is in episode 4, in which they claim that Ash says crap when talking back to Samurai after he calls him a novice.
I hope you've learned your lesson, novice. Your letting that Weedle escape almost cost our lives.
Take back that novice crack.
However, Ash is actually saying crack in this moment, as confirmed by the official closed captions. Another example is when James refers to the TV as the boob tube. Granted, this is cursing with a huge asterisk. And the last one I will talk about here is in Pokemon Origins. In the fight against Brock, Red shouts, "God damn!" several times. Or does he? See, here's the thing. All of those swear words come from the Japanese dub, and specifically the word shimata. Now, there are a couple of ways to translate this word, and one of those is damn. However, other equally valid ways to translate the word are oh no and oops. So, what is Red saying in the scene? It is quite literally all up to interpretation. Language is weird. Celebi Movie Tokubetsuhen. I'm not quite sure what this one is, but based on previous entries, I think I can make a pretty good guess. To me, there are two possibilities as to what this can be. The first is that, like Mewtwo, Celebi also possibly received a special edition with some minor changes, such as new CGI and the sort. However, I have my doubts about this one, since I couldn't find any evidence of such a version existing, especially compared to all the information I got from Mewtwo's special edition. The second possibility is that this could be a reference to the differences between the Japanese and English versions of the ending. You see, that ending I described back in the Sammy is Oak entry is actually exclusive to the English version of the movie. In the original Japanese, Sammy goes back to his original time, but Ash never calls Oak. The evidence to suggest Oak is Sammy in this version is at the very end, when Tracy finds a sketch of Pikachu and Celebi from the events of the movie in Oak's possession. The reason this new ending was made, according to the localizers of the film, is because they didn't like how open-ended the question of whether Sammy was Oak was, and wanted it ending with a definitive answer. While this also could be what the entry is referencing, I still also have my reservations, since if this entry is referring to the original ending, it would be weird to call that the special edition, and if the special edition is in reference to the new ending instead, then that also wouldn't fully make sense, since I couldn't really find any evidence pointing one way or the other as to whether Japan got the English ending. Despite my reservations, however, I still think that the different endings is what the entry is most likely talking about, though if I'm wrong, please correct me. The original first movie teaser and Adult Misty. Yet another interesting bit of information around the first movie. This time, we're talking about the first teaser trailer for the film. Being so early in the movie's development, it is very different from the film we got. The teaser features two women and a child walking in a field of grass. One of the women is describing some of the events of the film, while the teaser is cutting back and forth between the scenes from the movie and the scene of the three in the field, although most, if not all, the scenes aren't in the final film. There has long been speculation around this teaser, with many theorizing as to what the original story of the first movie could have been. One of the most popular theories, although now debunked by those who made the film, is that the adult woman explaining the events is an adult Misty, and that the child she's talking to is the child of her and Ash. As the theory goes, Misty is explaining a story about the child's father, Ash, and the kinds of adventures he had, or possibly even the event that took his life. Now, obviously the story changed during the movie's development, but it's still interesting to see how it was in its very early stages. This is a pretty well-known myth. Allegedly, when you play the section of the Poke Rap where the singers sing backwards, you can hear yeah, I'm not gonna be saying that. Sorry. Of course, when you actually play it backwards, it's incoherent garbage that sounds nothing like human speech. I'm kinda surprised that this entry was so far down. I thought the religious panic around Pokemon was pretty well documented. It's probably only down here because, ooh, Satan. Whatever. Professor Ivy is a lesbian. There are two things this entry could possibly be about. Professor Ivy is a lesbian, the headcanon, or Professor Ivy is a lesbian, the Twitter rumor. Let's start with Professor Ivy is a lesbian, the headcanon. At the start of the second season, Brock left Ash to live with Professor Ivy in the Orange Islands. At the end of the season, Brock is in Palatown, and completely shuts down when anyone even mentions the name Ivy. With that information, fans have long speculated as to what happened with him and Ivy. In the show, Misty suggests that Ivy simply dumped or rejected him, so that's a possibility. Other ideas that have been thrown around include Ivy having a husband or boyfriend, Brock getting Ivy pregnant and then running away from his responsibilities the same way his parents did, etc. The one we care about is the theory that suggests that Ivy is a lesbian, and as such, would have zero attraction to Brock. This theory, while not as popular as the dumping theory, is still overall a pretty solid theory that has had great staying power over the years. Alright, now let's talk about Professor Ivy is a lesbian, the Twitter rumor. In the late 2010s, early 2020s, a Twitter user had made a post claiming that Takeshi Shudo, the showrunner and creator of the anime, originally intended for Professor Ivy to be a lesbian, and for that to be the reason that Brock left. This tweet was later picked up by several websites, blogs, and YouTube videos, and the rumor spread. However, as far as we know, this claim seems to be false, or at the very least, there isn't a source to back it up. The original tweet source is Shudo's novelization, which doesn't mention Ivy even once, since it does not go as far as the Orange Islands arc. In addition, none of Shudo's blog posts ever mention Ivy being a lesbian, although they don't comment on her sexuality either way. So, overall, the evidence doesn't really point one way or the other on this topic, and seeing as Takeshi Shudo's dead, we'll likely never know his original intention. I guess moral of the story is, don't take Twitter's word for something, because misinformation's really bad on there. The first Pokemon movie's original ending. First Pokemon movie. You never fail to have cool trivia facts. This time, we're talking about the ending, and how Shudo's original plan differs from what we got. So, in the original, Mewtwo erases everyone's memory, and Ash and company leave the harbor to continue on their journey. It sounds lame, but it's actually a pretty good ending for the film. However, in Shudo's earlier drafts, the ending would have Ash die. Now before you start making your clickbaity headlines, let me explain. Ash wouldn't die during the events of the story. Instead, he dies 6 feet under style. That is to say, the movie flashes forward to Ash's final moments on Earth. Ash reminisces about his time with Pikachu, Brock, Misty, and all the others. He thinks about his regrets as an adult and how much more life he had as a child. Then, he would die, and get reincarnated as a young child yet again, setting off on a new journey to discover the meaning of life. Now, obviously, this is very strange, and you can tell it comes from a much earlier version of the movie where a lot of story points weren't set in stone. But it's still interesting to see how the movie could have been so radically different from the one we got. Misty x Mewtwo fanfic. Yeah, the title's pretty self-explanatory. Somewhere on the internet, there exists a Misty Mewtwo fanfiction. Yeah. Gross, gross. Takeshi's Paradise was removed after 6 episodes because parents complained. Takeshi's Paradise was the 9th Japanese ending of the Pokemon anime. It's a song about Brock and his world of love, the happy, the sad, and all in between. Viewers from America may recognize it as the only song Brock knows, from several gags where Brock has to entertain people for a long time. A joke that lasts all the way up into the Diamond and Pearl era. Now, here's the funny thing about this song. For how well known it is, it was only actually used as the ending song for 6 episodes. Why is that? The Japanese fandom thought. Much speculation was made, and in the end, the prevailing theory was that it was removed due to parents complaining. Whether they complained because they found the song annoying, or whether they complained about the overt romantic themes of it, I'm not sure. But this was the prevailing assumption among the community. That was until a 2017 interview with Brock's Japanese voice actor, Yuji Ueda. In it, he stated that Takeshi's Paradise was always meant to be a limited time ending, and that it was pulled off the air at the time the showrunners wanted it to be pulled off. Nothing else. Mystery solved. Porygon did nothing wrong. So, let's go all the way back to the first layer, an Electric Soldier Porygon. Recall the big moment, the one that sent kids to the hospital. What actually happened? A missile was launched at Ash and the gang, and Pikachu destroyed it with a Thunderbolt. Notice a name that wasn't mentioned in that synopsis. That's right, Porygon. You see, the actual attack that caused the troubles wasn't committed by Porygon, but by Pikachu. And this is the argument for Porygon did nothing wrong. You see, ever since that episode, Porygon's appearances in the anime have been limited to non-existent. It appears in transition scenes, a background photo, and a Who's That Pokemon spot, but in terms of actual appearances, nothing. Many fans argue that this is unfair, as it was Pikachu's Thunderbolt, not Porygon's, that caused the issue. It got to the point where the Pokemon Twitter account once tweeted, "Porygon did nothing wrong," although this tweet has since been deleted due to the uproar it caused. Here's the thing, though, or at least the reason I think Porygon hasn't made an appearance since. When someone says, "Hey, remember that Pikachu episode?" you have no idea which episode they're talking about. Pikachu has been in so many, it's hard to narrow it down. But when someone says, "Hey, remember the Porygon episode?" you know exactly which one they're talking about. Whether it's right or wrong, Porygon will always be attached to this episode. And so, it will forever be hidden in the anime. Pokemon Rise Up, Shudo's intended ending. The fun never ends with Shudo, does it? This time, we're talking about his proposed ending for the series as a whole. You see, when it first released, nobody expected Pokemon to be such a massive hit. Because of that, the original anime was only greenlit for one season in the beginning. Obviously, this changed, but Shudo had an idea for how the show would end if it really was the one run. And boy is it dark. According to Shudo, the way he intended for the show to end was in a massive Pokemon revolution, where Pokemon would overthrow their human masters to make a new world order. The talking piece and frontrunner of the revolution would, of all Pokemon, be Pikachu, believe it or not. Now, that sounds insane, and like it goes against everything Pokemon as a show is going for, but this was also very likely an early idea, and as it became more clear that Pokemon wasn't going anywhere, it became less likely that we would see this Pokemon revolution come to fruition. Still, it's weird to think about. Toshihiro Ono's Rocket Hentai. This is Totsuhiro Ono. He is the writer and artist of the Electric Tale of Pikachu manga, a manga that is a loose adaptation of the anime. Now, there are two things you need to know about him for this entry. Number one, it is well known and well documented that he is a hentai artist. He's worked on several hentais before he wrote the Electric Tale of Pikachu, and if you've actually looked at the uncensored Japanese art for that manga, boy does it show! Second is that he is the man that drew this image. Yes, your eyes are not deceiving you, that is an image of James and a very pregnant Jessie. You see, in the manga, these two characters are confirmed to be married, and, as the image implies, had a kid. So that's the end of it, right? Ono makes the panel, rocket shippers get their fuel, prices for the 4th volume of the manga skyrocket. All's well that ends well. Except no, it doesn't end there. Yeah, Jessie and James have a kid, but have you ever wondered how that kid was conceived? No? Well, too bad, because Ono made a hentai about that anyway! Yeah! Ew. Takeshi Shudo's novelization. Finally, we have come to our last entry, and this one's actually pretty easy for me. In the late 90s, Takeshi Shudo, the creator of the Pokemon anime, was given the opportunity to write a novel on the Pokemon anime without the corporate oversight of the Pokemon Company. From that opportunity came 2 light novels that are known as Pocket Monsters the Animation, or, as I like to call them, Pokemon the Animation, the Novelization. Anyway, these two novels are basically Shudo's unfiltered interpretations of the Pokemon world, and it is absolutely fascinating. There's the obvious stuff that lots of people know, such as how this novel is where we get the most information about Ash's father. Spoiler, he's a deadbeat who abandoned a 19 and pregnant Delia. But there's also Shudo's take on how the world and government of the Pokemon world works. The biggest example is how 10-year-olds are considered legal adults in this novel. The example Shudo gives is that if you steal something from a convenience store in our world, you get scolded and your parents will have to apologize, but that's it. In the Pokemon world, that can get you arrested for theft. There are so many weird and interesting things in this book. Frankly, I think it deserves its own discussion, so I'll leave this topic for now. And that is everything. That is the Pokemon Anime Iceberg explained to the best of my ability. There are so many things that we've seen today, that despite how much there was, there's still so much more depth we could have explored in this series, new things to learn and old things we've yet to discover. It may be never-ending, but you know what? That's my favorite part of Pokemon. There's so much to it, so much depth of knowledge to learn about one single topic, and yet that's just one facet of the franchise. Yeah, there's a lot here in the anime, but it's not just the anime. It's also the mangas, and the cards, and the spin-off games, and definitely the mainline series, all of which have just as much depth to them. It is truly never-ending, and that's awesome. Circling back around to the anime again, the future is very wide open at this point. Lots of big changes we haven't seen in a long while, and a lot of uncertainty about how things will pan out. But regardless, I'm still probably going to be here for the ride. So, I guess here's to the next 20 years of Pokemon animation, and to the bright future ahead.